Hi everyone, it's Splinterverse, and in this video I really want to try to help bring some ideas to the discussions that are happening right now. It's been pretty crazy the last few weeks with the OGL madness, and I just really want to try to bring some ideas to hopefully help the situation. But first I want to go through what this video is and is not before we deep dive into the ideas I have for you. So first of all, it's not going to be a deep dive into the OGL. If you want to learn about that, I've got some links in the video description to help you do that. That's been covered extensively by other creators, so I'm not going to go there in this video. This is not going to be bashing WotC. I like WotC. Yes, I'm unhappy. Yes, I'm disappointed with the way things are going. But I know that not every single person that works at Hasbro or at WotC is the problem. And I'm hoping that there's people there that are just looking for options and ways out of this situation, and that they need ideas, and that this video can be one of many ideas. These are not by any means the only ideas. These are just my ideas to help improve things. So we're going to suggest how WotC can move forward and get out of the situation they find themselves in right now. And we're going to identify problems that WotC was trying to solve. They did have some problems. Yes, you can debate the validity of these problems and the sincerity, but it does sound like there were things that they were trying to achieve. So we're going to look at those problems and offer some solutions that support the community, because I do believe we can have both. And we are going to be touching on a lot of aspects of D&D. So we're going to be talking about D&D Beyond. We're going to be talking about the Dungeon Masters Guild, VTT, crowdfunding, and much more, because really this discussion affects everything. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about my experience and why maybe my insight might be helpful. So I worked in traditional publishing for 10 years, so I'm familiar with that environment. I've also worked in marketing, including public relations, so I know what it's like to be in a situation like WotC finds itself right now and how to maybe get out of it. I've also worked as an analyst for Fortune 500 companies, and the reason I say that is because I'm very familiar with the pressure to do quarterly reports and how reporting impacts that, and every little detail can impact the quarterly report. So I have all of that experience in my mind as I'm thinking of these ideas and potential ways out for WotC. I started playing D&D with the basic edition, those fun little box sets that you'd find in a hobby shop. And I own a third-party publisher in Splinterverse Media, so I do have experience from there as well. But I'm not a lawyer, and I don't represent everyone in the community. So even though I'm going to present these ideas, please don't think that I'm trying to represent everybody. I'm sure you're going to like some of my ideas, you're going to hate some of my ideas, you're going to be mad about some, and that's okay. I'm just trying to start discussion. I'm just trying to maybe help the people over in the Hasbro and WotC offices to get some inspiration, maybe give them some ideas so that they can come out of this in a way that works for everybody, because that's the ultimate goal. So how do they restore trust? So I'm just going to give some general ideas. This will not restore everyone's trust. Some people's trust is lost and is never going to come back. I can't do anything about that. But I do feel like some of these things that I'm about to say will help restore some trust. And some of it's going to be hard to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway. So first of all, you got to make the OGL 1.0A and the prior licenses officially irrevocable. It's not going to hold up in court to revoke that, especially in Europe. You just got to concede that loss. There are ways to create your own separate license for future editions if you want. We're going to talk about those later. But it's just a battle you're not going to win. You're just going to deepen the animosity in the community. And if you make this statement that those licenses, that you've reviewed it, you've looked at it with other counsel, and you've decided that they're officially irrevocable, that's going to go a long way to the community feeling comfortable with you and using those licenses. And it's going to show that you are open to learning, as we all are and should be. You might have to make some staffing changes. I mean, somebody was pushing for all of these things. You might have to shuffle some people around, let somebody go, maybe even bring in some trusted folks from the community to act as advisors or consultants as you work through this situation. It can be a temporary contract. Work with them, bring them in, let them advise you on things. By no means let them choose the final wording of things, you know, go through the draft process and use transparency and let people weigh in, But having a few people there to bounce ideas off that are impartial, that are outside of the business, that aren't afraid to lose their jobs, could really help you to get some honest and good feedback before you put your foot in your mouth again. Be transparent, continue to do that where you can. I know you've been that way about certain things in the past. I know this one, it's been a little weird, but on past things, there's been some things where you've been transparent. So just go that route and listen. You got to listen to the community. It's super important. Without that, it's just not going to get any better. The community is a very smart community. Not all communities are super smart, but this one is. I mean, we crunch numbers. We do all kinds of math in our heads as we're battling these dragons and things. So take advantage of that brain trust. Use it and listen. Now I'm going to this is not a sponsored video, but I just want to point out, as we're looking at opportunities to change the perception of your company, I want to remind you of Macy's and the Miracle on 34th Street, and how the attitude of the Macy's employees was, if we don't offer the widget that you're here to buy, and we know a company that offers that widget, we will direct you to them because we actually care about you and your experience as a customer, and we want to be of value to you even when we're not making the sale ourselves. So if you think about that from the point of view of the OGL, let's say I make a widget with Splinterverse Media. Maybe I make an alien symbiote subclass, and you don't have that in your books, and somebody asks you, hey, where can I get an alien symbiote subclass? You can say, well, there's this third-party publisher known as Splinterverse Media. Go to them. I'm just using myself as an example, but you see the idea. You refer other people to these partners in the community that are help amplifying and uplifting your brand on the daily. When anybody makes any content for Dungeons and Dragons, OGL or otherwise, it is an advertisement for your brand. It is an advertisement for your company that usually you're not paying for. So appreciate that and return the favor by referring people outwards, and you'll just amplify that ripple effect that we're seeing. But think of Macy's, because Macy's did this, and what happened? People trusted them. They believed in them, because again, we're talking about rebuilding your trust in the community. All right, so problems to solve. WotC had a number of problems. They want to increase monetization, and this video is filled with ways that WotC can increase monetization. So I hope you're listening and that you can take these to the executives and convince them to try some of these ideas or other ideas from the community instead of the ones that you've been trying that have upset everyone. Protecting the brand. There's ways that you can do that through some of these monetization ideas. So I'm going to talk about that. There's a certain amount of things that are just going to be beyond your control, but most consumers are smart enough to know when a product is produced by Wizards of the Coast versus when it's not. So to a certain extent, I'd say you also don't have to worry about it as much. You're going to have big marquee space with your origination of the brand, so I wouldn't worry about that one too much. And there are little things you can do to do that, so we'll help you with that as we go. Preventing litigation, I know there was a concern about that from copying ideas. I would say look at your designer contracts. I mean, most designer contracts should have something that says, I'm stating that what I'm writing for you is original, that I didn't copy it from anywhere. That should protect you to a certain extent, and the designer, of course. Obviously, you can't prevent somebody from having the same idea as somebody else, and you are a large company, so you're always going to be a target. So you're not going to eliminate that risk. You're not going to reduce it to zero. But you can reduce it a little bit by looking at your designer contracts and just making sure that you have the right language in there, because we've seen cases where writers for magazines, etc., will come in and plagiarize something, or a writer of a book will, outside of the ttrpg space. So I understand that concern, but as far as, some third-party publisher suing you because something's similar, just take it to court and deal with it. I mean, it's going to happen. Hasbro's a huge company. You're going to be a target. There's no way to prevent that 100%. And then this notion of large corporations, I think you just have to accept that there are going to be cottage industries built around you. The Super Bowl comes to town. Somebody is going to benefit from that is not the NFL, right? There's going to be all these corporations, small, large, medium, that benefit from that. If you keep doing what you're doing, you could become a smaller fish in the pond. I think with the ideas in this video, you can stay dominant, and other ideas that are out there. But large corporations really are not your problem. If anything, they're getting large, and that largeness is going to make your message reach even more and more people, because you do need not only existing customers but new customers. And that ripple on the water that's created when when a third party amplifies the rock that you threw into that water is just going to get bigger and bigger. The more corporations, the more companies that are out there, and if they continue to rely on you, that's good for business. They're going to be looking at what you're doing. They're going to be talking about what you're doing. They're going to be referring to it. So it's a good situation for you. I know that the leaks kind of indicated going a different direction, but I would personally not worry about that. You have that marquee value that others don't have just as much of yet. Now, 1D&D, you really have a couple of options for what you do with that. It could be maintaining the backwards compatibility and sticking with the 1.0A OGL license. I would love to see that happen. I know you guys are concerned about continuing under the 1.0A license, but personally, I would love to see that. The other option would be to sever that backwards compatibility and say, okay, 1D&D is not going to be backwards compatible anymore because we're going to have our own new license for this. But I would say you got to be careful with that, because 4th edition proved that if you go down that route, people will just abandon you and go to Pathfinder or Kobold Press's Black Flag or whatever the new system is that shows that openness and respect. So I would go for the first option. I know you're scared of it, but it's 1 edition, right? You do it for 1D&D, it doesn't work out. You can do something different for 2D&D or whatever the next one after that is called, okay? You have options here, and you can always change the tactics for the edition after 1D&D. So before we get into the larger options for monetization, the ones that I think I haven't heard out there, I think we need to talk about the obvious ones. And of course, novels. You can license the novel rights to all of your settings. Get those novels out there. Get the word out. There's a lot of passionate readers out there. You could do so many books. I know there's some Dragonlance books, and there's some Forgotten Realms books with Drizzt, but it's not like it used to be where there were tons and tons of novel options out there. And I really think this is an opportunity for you to make some additional funds and monetize, as you've talked about. Of course, you have movies that you can monetize. You have things like merch, like t-shirts. You've got toys and other types of games, board games outside of tabletop RPGs, and you've got television, and these are just scratching the surface. There's stationery, amusement park rides, lunch boxes, product placement, even accessories for gaming like dice towers, storage cases, etc. You can go wild, and you don't have to make it all yourself. You can partner with third-party companies and split it, or do whatever makes sense to both partners to really expand and bring in that monetization. And again, this is the obvious stuff, but I didn't want to leave it out because people would be like, well, what about all that merch? So here it is. So let's talk about DM's Guild opportunities, and then we'll get into D&D Beyond next. So you really have to decide, are you going to incorporate 1D&D content into Dungeon Masters Guild? I hope you do. I love the Dungeon Masters Guild. Yes, it has a 50-50 split, which is not always everyone's favorite, but at least it gives you an option to play in the Wizard's sandbox if you want to do that. So you have to decide, are you going to put the 1D&D edition on there or not? Once you've done that, I think you should also think about expanding the DM's Guild to earlier editions. I know that it's not going to be massive dollars, but with all of these things that I'm going to present to you added up, you are going to get an increase in revenue, which is what you're after, and can replace the avenues you were pursuing before that upset the community, right? So if you expand to earlier editions, so basic all the way through 4th edition content available on the DM's Guild, either under the existing community content, license or different licenses, however you want to do it, you're going to expand the customer base that shows up to DM's Guild. You're going to expand the profit of things that are sold. You're already selling earlier edition official TSR and Wizard of the Coast products on there. So just expanding it outward to include those other earlier editions as far as new content would be great. And there are people putting out content for that elsewhere. So they might decide that they want that DM's Guild audience for that content. And then that gives you some additional revenue. And it would be their choice. They're not forced, right? All of these are choices that are truly voluntary, and that is critical with your monetization options moving forward. The minute you start forcing people down a path, they're going to abandon you and go to the next best system. You've got to provide some thoughtful integration from DM's Guild into D&D Beyond. And when I say thoughtful, I mean you can't just open the floodgates and put every book that's on Dungeon Masters Guild on D&D Beyond. I think you try some things out. Maybe you look at bestsellers. Maybe you look at certain levels and above, whether it's platinum and above, gold and above, whatever it is, to integrate some of those bestsellers. If they're bestsellers, they've proven there's an interest in them. So then allowing those to be also sold on D&D or to be integrated into D&D Beyond is a really nice option. It might encourage people to put their stuff on DM's Guild so that they can have that integration. It would get you some profits from people purchasing those things, because some people, let's be honest, won't purchase a book from DM's Guild because they only use D&D Beyond. So if you integrate the two of them in some way, again, thoughtfully, maybe it's a slow rollout. You're only putting things for a certain setting, or you're only putting certain seller levels over there. Whatever it is, don't open the floodgates and put everything on there all at once. It needs to be thoughtful. But you do need that integration. And then I would also seriously look at expanding the license options to allow some OGL inclusion with rights retention on the DM's Guild. So what I mean by that is an OGL title published by a third-party publisher where they get to sell it on the DM's Guild for a certain percentage that goes to One Bookshelf and WotC, and they get to keep all the rights to it. Because the current agreement is when you publish on there, you give up the rights and you have a 50% cut. But that's because you're using potentially IP and other things. We're going to talk more about this later. But you're giving up some things to be able to play in the Wizards IP sandbox, right? But there are people that do go on there and they publish stuff that is just completely unrelated to any of those things. They're very generic. They could have published it on DriveThruRPG, but they chose to do it because they want that audience. DriveThruRPG is great, but it is focused on many different games, right? Dungeon Masters Guild is focused purely on Dungeons and Dragons. So there are publishers like myself that would think about it and say, okay, if I have to give up a 20% cut to go on there and get access to the eyeballs of Dungeon Masters Guild, is it worth it? Would I publish this book? Yeah, maybe I would for this book. Maybe not for another book. I don't know. I'd have to think about it, right? But you're giving us options, and those are options where you make money and it's voluntary. So again, think about that. How can you bring in those OGL titles? I know the people that are publishing on DM's Guild, I don't want the OGL stuff on here competing. But you got to remember, people that are publishing on DM's Guild, the benefit of your stuff is it connects to lore, and anything that brings traffic. If those publishers bring more traffic, they're going to see your product. So don't be jealous. Don't try to keep it all to yourself. We got to think about ways to expand the options, and also for One Bookshelf to make some additional funds as well. So now let's talk about the D&D Beyond opportunities that I see. So with the customers, you got to think about Battle Pass versus cosmetic, because more than likely this is going to get rolled into the VTT, D&D Beyond, and the Wizards VTT is going to end up combined. And we're going to talk about the VTT separately in just a minute. But in thinking about payments and how to get in there and use integrate with the service, are you going to have a Battle Pass, or are you going to do what I call Cosmetic Plus? I would argue against the Battle Pass. The people that work for Hasbro that are from Microsoft should understand this. People don't like Battle Passes, and having to basically buy packs of cards and lottery to try to get what your content. No, none of that. You need to move where the community wants to go, and not just D&D community, the community of game players, toward cosmetics. Everybody understands buying cosmetics is not pay to win. It's supporting the system. And if somebody wants to bling out everything they have and support the entity that's providing this stuff, great. That gives us more opportunity to use the system. It's got the money it needs to keep the servers alive, etc. So go toward that cosmetic plus route. Ignore the battle pass. I know it's tempting, but it will fail in this industry. Subscriptions, I would keep them as is, but with some additions, and we're going to talk about what those are. Don't do the $30 per player. Be happy with what you have, because you're if you go the $30 per player, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it. I'm telling you. Now, the additions to the subscriptions. Right now, Homebrew seems to be free. I'm not sure what the max limit is, but maybe what you do is you allow a reasonable limit of Homebrew, and then once you exceed that, you have to have a subscription of some kind to continue expanding your homebrew. I'm not sure. I don't have a subscription to D&D Beyond, so maybe it already works that way. I'm not sure. So correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. But I would look at Homebrew and allow some Homebrew for free accounts, but I wouldn't make it unlimited. I don't think anybody should expect to be able to upload 400 spells with a free account. I mean, that's a lot of storage on the server, and you gotta just kind of accept, hey, if I'm willing to have just a free account, I can't expect 400 spells. So gotta figure out what that balance is. I'm not the person to tell you what it is. You can probably look at your statistics and figure out the best number. But that's one thing that you could do to differentiate a subscription versus a free account. Publishing on D&D Beyond. Offer older editions, including functionality. Again, this isn't going to be earth-shattering billions of dollars, but it's going to add drops to that bucket to show monetization. It probably wouldn't be that hard for certain editions to be added. They're not super different from 5th edition in every single respect. So you could quickly probably bring in people, get those older editions in there, and then people can start using D&D Beyond for various editions. You could also allow new content for those editions to be developed using that. So that's cool. You could do a monthly Dragon or Dungeon Magazine-esque content where you get it cheaper if you're a subscriber. You know, so maybe you get a 10 to 15% discount off of these drops, or maybe you can buy them individually. I think either way would be good. You should offer both options because not everybody's going to be able to be a subscriber and you don't want people to miss out. But I would stick to content that's considered bonus content. The minute you start putting stuff in these drops where it's like you have to have this class, you can't play without this class, people are going to get angry. So if you stick it to like a new adventure, new spells, things that aren't game breaking, I think people will be okay, and they'll accept that, by supporting some of these drops, they're supporting the platform and the company. And then I would really take a hard look at third-party publications for a voluntary percentage free, and that the third party retains rights. So, I have several third-party OGL books that I've published that are not on DM's Guild. I would, if you're offering the opportunity for me to integrate it with D&D Beyond for either a percentage of every sale on there or a flat fee, I would definitely look at that. I'm not saying I would for sure do it, but I would look at that as an option, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So there's a way you can monetize, and again, the more content on that platform that people rely upon, once you buy something on there, you're going to be back. You want to use your stuff, right? So it's stickiness. You're bringing them back in. It's like keeping them logged in, right? So this is another way. Then Kobold Press or whoever can be saying, hey, go over to D&D Beyond and check out our Tome of Magic or whatever. And then there they are. They're advertising your service. They're getting people to log in. They're driving business toward you. Yes, they're getting their cut, but you're getting some money out of that, and you're getting that stickiness, which is important. And then just a wild idea. What if you had one of these settings that hasn't come to 5th edition yet, and it became exclusive to D&D Beyond for creators that publish there, whether it's Greyhawk, Mystara, some MTG plane. There's so many settings that have yet to have a book, and maybe you just don't even publish a book for it. You just say, we want D&D Beyond to have something special. We're going to do Greyhawk, or we're going to do Zendikar, or whatever, and third-party publishers could show up, and you could have an arrangement either like the DM's Guild or some other arrangement where, again, it's voluntary to publish content in that setting, and then people buy it on D&D Beyond, they add it to their collection, increase the stickiness, you get some money, the third parties get some money, you're supporting the community, they're earning money, right? So it's a win-win for everybody as long as the terms are reasonable. So got to be reasonable, can't be too greedy with this stuff, right? All right, now let's look at some VTT opportunities. Okay, so we got to be honest. Do you need a VTT to play the game? No, you can play it without a VTT. So if you're thinking that you're going to make D&D require a VTT, you're going down the wrong road. You got to back off of that. It's not going to work. I'm here to tell you that. You also got to accept that there's competition. Yes, it would be fantastic in a perfect world if you own Hasbro to say we're the only one. We have no competition. It's just not realistic. There's lots of great VTT systems out there. Don't ignore them. Coexist and accept it. So that brings me to the next point. Walled off versus not walled off. It's not worth it. Trying to wall it off, make it so that you have to be in there. You can't play the game without it. Give that up. I get it. There are probably accountants at Hasbro. There's probably people in legal at Hasbro looking at it going, this is what we have to do. The answer is no. You don't understand the market. It's not going to work. Those walls will be sieged. You don't want to do it. All right. So fee versus subscription. You know, I don't know what makes the most sense. You got to think about what your competitors are doing. Some of them are doing fees. Some are doing subscription situations. You got to look at what the market is supporting, and you got to do something similar. You can't do something crazy. Okay, you got to look at what the market's doing, and you're going to have to offer some limited free access. You're going to have to count on the DM buying access to this and connecting their players. If you don't, there's plenty of competition. They'll go use Roll20. They'll go use Foundry. They'll go use Fantasy Grounds. It's out there. I'm being real with you here. You can offer a ton of cosmetic options. From what I saw of your preview of your VTT, it looks like very three-dimensional. So you have a lot of options to add cosmetics, but there's even more ways you can go with that. You can offer charity versions of your cosmetics where you give a portion to charities. You can do contests where your users can submit artwork that can be transformed into a 3D model. You can have guest artists that are famous and have a huge following and leverage their social media capabilities. There's so many ways with cosmetics, and that's why you need to follow that model. Look at Dead by Daylight, some of the things that they do with that video game as far as bringing in their community, designing cosmetics for the characters, etc., and having contests and just building a buzz around it. And it's a way, again, to reach out and embrace the community and work with them instead of resisting. Okay. Now you're going to also have to accept that DMs have to have import capabilities for free at a minimum. So if they paid the fee or the subscription to get into your VTT, they need to be able to bring those tokens in, whether they're third party or homebrew. They need to be able to bring those maps in, third party or homebrew. This idea that they're only going to use what you have is just not going to cut it. They will go to Roll20. They will go to Foundry. I'm telling you. I don't own stake in any of these companies. I'm just telling you what I've observed. This is what market research would tell you. So accept it if you want to play in this space. It's the only way to win. Have a marketplace for third-party content for 1%. You could even toy with exclusivity. Like if you sell this token here, you can't sell it somewhere else. I know that's icky for some people, but you know, you might want to corner the market on some stuff, and that could be an option. Okay. Or you can say you can sell an adventure that's designed for this VTT, but you can't sell it for another VTT. You know, you could do some stuff like that. Now you're going to get some pushback, but you got to find some ways. Thinking like a business, you got to find some ways to sort of carve out your niche and say, okay, well, these adventures you can only get here because this third party is only publishing this adventure here, you know. So I get it. You know, I would consider that option depending on what sales numbers look like. You know, you'd have to show me some data as a publisher to whether I wanted to participate in that, but I would consider it. So look at that. In any case, I think you should have a marketplace allowing third parties to sell stuff because, again, you can take a percentage of that. It's voluntary. They don't have to participate. So you can reasonably expect to take a percentage of sales from a marketplace like that. And then make it the best in the industry. If you want dominance, make it better than Foundry. Make it better than Roll20. They've been around for a long time. You know, they've got a lot of capabilities, so that's going to be a challenge. But if you build it, they will come, and if you build it the best, even more will come, is what I would say. So just make it the absolute best. Instead of trying to eliminate the competition, just make such good stuff that people cannot resist using your product. All right, so now before I get into publishing and crowdfunding and some of the other options, I do need to take a break and show you a little bit about the components of D&D content, because this other stuff isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to you if I don't. So there's really three components. There's the SRD mechanics, the core classes, the core races, some spells, some monsters, some items, some subclasses, etc., that are listed in the SRD, which is what publishers that are third party are allowed to use if they use the OGL. So it has your core classes like Wizard, Sorcerer, Bard, but it doesn't have all the classes because that is non-SRD mechanics. So something like an Artificer class, which was not around when the SRD was created and was not in the Player's Handbook, is a mechanic for Dungeons and Dragons, but it's what we call in publishing non-SRD. It's not part of the SRD, so we can't use it unless we're publishing on DM's Guild. Now, some people get funny and they kind of trick their way around it, or they'll do fan content to get to use it. But in general, you can't use those non-SRD mechanics legally. Same with lineages or piety. These are mechanics that have been developed that are outside of the SRD, and these are just a few. There's a lot of them that get developed over time. You can't use those without being on DM's Guild legally. Okay, so this shows you the separation: the core classes, the core races, elf, dwarf, etc. Spells like fireball, they're able to be used under the OGL with no payment to wizards. Non-SRD mechanics, if you want to use those today outside of free fan content, you have to publish on the DM's Guild, and then 50% goes to one bookshelf and Wizards of the Coast combined, okay? So you can use it, but under certain circumstances. Then the other part of it, of the content, is the intellectual property. That's the settings, the characters, the lore, all of those proper names and things that you see in a Dungeons and Dragons book. So they just released Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. So Dragonlance is a part of their IP. You know, Lord Soth, all of these characters are part of their IP. And so if you want to use them, right now your option is to publish on the DM's Guild, because there is basically this barrier between these. DM's Guild publishers can use all three of these things. Now they're limited. You can't just publish on any setting. Like you can't publish for Mystara on there because it's not an authorized setting on there. But in general, you can use the bulk of the IP. You can use both SRD mechanics and non-SRD mechanics on DM's Guild. So the reason why I'm showing this to you is I want to say this is sliced one way. It's divided right here. There are other ways to slice these components to make additional monetization opportunities that are voluntary for publishers. And I, as a publisher, would consider participating in those other slices to get access to things that I can't with this simple slicing that's going on here on screen. So there's many ways to cut into a cake, right? Right now it's cut like this: two pieces, one small, one bigger. Okay, there are other ways to cut this cake. So we're going to look at some alternative licenses. And I'm not saying these alternative licenses would work for everybody, and they're not OGL. These are separate opportunities that would coexist with the OGL, that can be done in a way that benefits both Wizards of the Coast and the third-party publisher, and would lead to money for both. So there's lots of combinations. And if you think about it, if somebody publishes an OGL product right now, Wizards of the Coast gets 0% of the revenue or profit from that product. Yes, they get free advertising. Yes, they get people sort of redirecting them to the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Player's Handbook and things like that, right? But they're not getting actual money from the sales, okay? So if they don't greed and they offer some alternative licenses that can turn that 0% to a positive number, that could satisfy the corporate need for monetization. So let's give some examples. And these are just examples. There's a bunch of ways to slice this cake. Don't think that my examples are the only ones. So, project plus edition specific irrevocable license to partial IP, such as a setting, but you can only use SRD mechanics and new mechanics. So you can parse this up, right? We can look at the SRD versus non-SRD. We can look at the IP, and it can be a portion of IP. So you could, let's use an example here. Let's say the contract is for Dragonlance. You can use stuff from Dragonlance. You can refer to Dragonlance. You can use characters from Dragonlance. But in terms of the mechanics inside your book, you can only use SRD or your own invention of mechanics. You don't get that non-SRD. So you see how I sliced it down even further? I said, rather than that whole circle of IP, I'm going to slice it down to just Dragonlance. And I'm going to slice it down to, on the mechanics side, I'm going to keep it in that circle of just SRD only. That's just one option. You can mix and match all of these to provide options. I, as a publisher, would say, okay, so I'm just throwing out a number. Let's say Wizard said, okay, we'll take 15% of profit, or we'll take 15% sold on these outlets on D&D Beyond or wherever, right? In return for you using this, being allowed to use Dragonlance, and you have to stick with SRD or new mechanics. I might sign on the line to do that because I would be volunteering to do that. I wouldn't be forced into it, right? So that's an opportunity to make some additional money. So it went from 0% in that example to 15%. Okay. Nothing versus 15%. So you've got to think about that if you're in the corporate offices watching this video. Okay, I hope you are. Lots of other opportunities. And when you're creating these special licenses, you can put stuff in there like you cannot make offensive content. Okay, that was one of the big stinks about the new OGL, that you had to add that. I think there's ways to prevent that. Outside of changing the license. But still, if you're creating these alternative project-specific, edition-specific. So if I, as Splinterverse Media, would sign this, I would only be signing up for an individual project of one book for 5th edition or 1D&D edition, etc., to write for Dragonlance and publish outside of DM's Guild or wherever, right? So it's separate. It's separate. It's not signing me up for everything I publish ever. Right? Because that's greed. We're saying don't greed with this. Do individual parts. Now, this is going to cost some overhead because you're going to have people at your company reviewing this stuff if you want to go this route. But it could lead to some money. There's some very powerful third-party publishers that might be willing to give up 5, 10, 15% of a book to be able to stretch outside of that SRD. Right? The SRD eventually becomes sort of a limitation. Here's another example. Project edition specific irrevocable license to all mechanics, but no IP. So I would be very fond of this license, being able to use the Artificer, being able to use lineages, these mechanics that are not in SRD. I would love that opportunity, and to be able to publish my own OGL book with those options, and maybe I have to give up 10% or whatever to Wizards of the Coast for that. I'm not giving up all my rights. That doesn't mean they can go publish whatever I published and claim it to be their own. So again, don't greed, but I would be paying a little bit extra or taking some off the top to be able to use things that I can't use today. Now, of course, I can go invent my own mechanics instead of having Artificer, but there might be a project where this fits. I'm not saying that publishers should have to sign up for these special licenses for every book. Absolutely not. But there may be thoughts in their head that they have that they can't explore because they're forced into DM's Guild only, or they're forced into other situations. And with these, splitting this into multiple opportunities rather than the 3 they have now. They have fan content, OGL, and DM's Guild. That's it. Let's make more options. Let's do a la carte stuff. There's, we're adults. Let's go through the buffet and pick the different things we want and make it a situation where WotC makes some money, we make some money, everybody's happy. We get to have Artificer in our book or whatever and call it Artificer and don't have to come up with funny business. All right. So Just showing you how this could work. And, you know, another thing that might be interesting, what if, as a publisher, you could have early access to a draft of Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen? Maybe you want to make a Dragonlance book for either DM's Guild or through one of these special licenses. So maybe one of the things, and it could, you know, maybe the percentage goes up or down based on the options you select in this little buffet. Maybe it's you get to see drafts. So then you know, okay, that book has this. I'm not going to put that in my book. And I'm going to refer to this item that's in their book with a page number because I've seen it. I've seen the draft. I know it's coming. I can prepare better. I would pay for that as a publisher. So you see, these are things that people are voluntarily willing to give WotC some money for, going from 0 to a positive number. And these are just a few examples. I would slice it up like a smorgasbord buffet where you can pick and choose little things, and each thing you pick increases the percent, because then it's community driven. You'll see what the market is wanting and using, and you can even try it. You can just try it with certain pieces of IP. You can try it out, try it with select publishers, see what happens, and then roll it out to the larger group. If you're piloting it and you're telling people you're piloting it, then we can all play along and see how it goes, and then you can tweak it. All right, so just some options for you to monetize in a fair way to everybody. So like I said, try it and see what happens. Now let's talk about publishing opportunities. Try those per project edition alternate licenses in addition to 1.0A. Let 1.0A stand. I recommend it for both 5th edition and 1D&D. Let it stand. People will amplify and advertise your product, and then try these little a la carte things. See what becomes popular. Because then maybe when you get to 7th edition or 2D&D or whatever you do next, you'll have learned from this. You'll have monetized more than you're doing now. You're going from 0 to a positive number, but you'll have learned from it, and you can see what other kind of opportunities publishers are willing to participate with you on. You can also increase your output, which you need to do if you want to have monetization go up. You need to increase the output of the books that are being produced by Wizards of the Coast, those official books that have that marquee value. And you can do this through partnerships with third-party publishers. You've already done it. You did it with D&D Next. You had some third-party publishers working with you early on. You're already using a lot of contractors anyway. Go further. Reach out to Paizo. Reach out to Cobalt Press. Reach out to Splinterverse Media. We're here. We'll do it. Partner with them and create an official book released through your official channels. And again, generate that goodwill. Engage them in a contract. And just for that project, don't try to lock them up for everything. Just for that project, and see what happens. It's, again, you're going to be getting quality stuff. If the ultimate goal is to be the dominant player, then if you start partnering with people that are doing really great stuff, people are going to be drawn to your product. They're going to say, oh, wow, look, they're working with this really hot designer. They're working with this really super cool artist, right? And they're going to want to check it out. And then those third parties are going to also want to promote what they did with you, right? Because it's their baby. It's something they created. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's putting money into the industry. It's showing that you're reaching across to the community. You're grabbing them by the hand and pulling them in and participating with them. And then thereafter, they're going to have that cachet of having worked with you. And so people that maybe learned about them through you will maybe look at their other work. So it's really just going to be a really nice give and take. And I encourage you to do it. Another thing you could try to do, sell some ad space to third-party publishers on D&D Beyond or wherever. Maybe your free tier, there's some ads on the side of the screen. I don't know. Maybe on your VTT, there's some ads on the screen if you have a free thing. I mean, most people kind of are used to, if I'm not paying, I may have to see some ads, right? So as a third-party publisher, I would be interested. Even as not a third-party publisher, maybe I make accessories for Dungeons & Dragons. Maybe I make bags to carry dice in. Maybe I make t-shirts, whatever it is. Maybe I want to buy some ad space. Money voluntarily given to you. That's what you need to pursue in your corporate offices to get through this period and to get things back on track. People understand these situations. They're willing to look at an ad to have free access to something. You know, all of the streamers, think about it. Netflix has an ad supported tier, right? Look into this. Even in the back of your books, why not? If you said I could buy an ad for one of my books and put it in the back of yours, I would consider it. So you've got opportunities here to make money without making everybody upset. Improve upon your physical and digital combos. I purchased the bundle for Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, and I got my book like a month late. Okay, that's not good. And I understand that was a trial. You probably aren't going to work with the partner that fulfilled those again, so I get it. I recognize it from the business point of view. I'm sure the customers are blaming you, a lot of them, but from having been through this situation, having worked in, publishing, traditional publishing, I get it. It was the partner's fault probably. So, retool that, improve it, come up with other ways. Maybe you get, you get the physical, you get the digital on D&D Beyond, and you get the VTT piece, and maybe you get a little side content that goes with it from Dungeon Masters Guild. You can even go further with your bundles. Maybe you get some branded dice bag or something else, right? There's so many ways with that merch that we talked about to monetize these bundles, but you got to get it right. The way the Dragonlance one was a mess. So you gotta improve on that and own it. Just tell people we messed up. It didn't work out the way we hoped on our Dragonlance bundle. And honestly, just make your books the gold standard. Make them the best that they can absolutely be. You know, you've had some challenges. I mean, people complained about Spelljammer not having legit space combat stuff. There's been complaints about some of the other books. If you can head those off at the pass by involving some players and how movies will have screenings and then they'll change the ending of a movie, have some trusted DMs, have some people look at it and say, what is it missing? And then when you're budgeting for those books, have a little line item in your budget to go back and do an extra chapter or go back and do a little something that is lacking. Because if you can make your books literally the best books for Dungeons and Dragons, and you come out of this dark time where people still want to play Dungeons and Dragons, then you won't have to worry about these large corporations. You won't have to worry about these third-party publishers, because everybody's going to want your stuff. They're just going to want it. It's great. It's good. No complaints. This is the exact book I wanted, right? So focus on making your books the gold standard on the creative side, and you're going to have to bring in some people. Don't just do surveys, because surveys, it skews toward people that will just respond, right? And that's helpful, and I would use the surveys, but I would also bring in some people and have them, look at it and say, okay, you're a DM, what's missing? And then use that line item in your budget to fill that gap. So now let's talk about crowdfunding. We're almost done with this video. I realize it's long, but there's a lot to say. So current state, you can only crowdfund if you're making an OGL publication. You can't crowdfund for DM's Guild if you're using those other components of the content. So it's just one method to getting to crowdfunding. So I would say, look at those licenses I talked about. Maybe there's some one-off licenses where you'll say, okay, you can crowdfund and you can mention Dungeons and Dragons and you can use Greyhawk. Let's do a buffet of options for publishers where you get a royalty that they're fine with. Don't try to go after revenue. That's not going to work. You need to look at what are others in this space doing. What is BackerKit doing? What are these other places that are partnering with crowdfunders doing? How are they determining their percentage? And then that's the model you need to look at. Again, I'm not saying use any of the numbers I mentioned in this video, because I don't have the research to give you the numbers. I'm just saying, look at those techniques and maybe learn from that. Now here's something I would pay for if I was going to crowdfund. If you tell me, if I give you X% of my profit, or I give you a flat fee, you will go on Wizards of the Coast Twitter account and you will promote my Kickstarter campaign or Indiegogo or whatever, I might pay up for that. You see, you can leverage what you have as well. You have this social media, you have these names, you have Wizards of the Coast as a brand, you have Dungeons and Dragons as a brand. If you can blast your readership and say, hey, there's this Kickstarter for whatever over here, I might pay for that. But when you come and tell me I have to give you 20% no matter what, no. That is not going to cut it. You're going to end up in court. That's not how things work. That's greed. That's overreach. But you can get me to come to you and say, I will give you percentage because I want this thing that you're offering, that you're dangling in front of me. Okay, so take this video, talk to the people at Hasbro, talk to the people at Wizards of the Coast, show them these ideas, come up with similar ones, get ideas from other people, and just say, look, there's so many ideas. Here's one video with a bunch of ideas of ways we can monetize without screwing everyone over and making them hate us. Everybody wins. My Kickstarter would do better. You would get some money. You would go from 0 to a positive number on that percent. It's a good situation. Consider it. And then combine it with other license options. Maybe, like I said, those settings, more mechanics, D&D Beyond integration, whatever, you know, again, a la carte. Say, okay, you want this, it's X percent. You want this, it's another X percent. And you find a percent that works for you. So you're not forced into that 20%. And people aren't crying and saying, there's no margin now on my project. They can say, I took a 1%. I'm giving 1% because they gave me access to this mechanic, or they gave me access to this thing, and it was worth it because I got to use it, or they promoted me on social media, or whatever they took a percentage for. It's a partnership, and you can have that, and it's great. All right, so that, in a nutshell, are my ideas, just my ideas, to get you out of this mess, Wizards of the Coast, and get you on the path to being the best you. As I said, nothing is going to eliminate competition or reduce competition or increase monetization more than being literally the best. You have the potential. You've dominated before. You can continue to dominate, but you're not going to do it alone. And you absolutely have to focus on quality in your content, and quality in your negotiations, quality in your treatment of the community. If you do that in all of these places, you're going to win, we're going to win, everyone's going to win, including those shareholders or those accountants or those legal folks that are saying, monetize, bring up that percent for that quarterly report. It's got to be 1% higher by the next quarter. I get it. I've been there. I've been through all of that. It's very stressful. You can do it. I believe in you. Consider these ideas, because I hope we get to a point where all of this is resolved. Everybody's happy. We breathe a sigh of relief, and we go forth, and we have great adventures together. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Like the video, leave me a comment, let me know what ideas you have, questions you have about my ideas, or anything else you want to share. And I hope you keep watching and hang out with me in the future and future videos, and even consider some of my books. I'm gonna play a little selection of ads for those right after this. So thanks so much. Have a great day, and until next time, happy adventuring. Splinterverse Media has a lot of books that you can add to your D&D table. You can check all of them out in the video description links or by visiting us at splinterverse.com. Our newest release, Dragonlance Companion, offers 180 pages for players and DMs to bring the magical world of Krynn to life. And like many of our books, it's available in hardcover and digital format. Our Swarms of the Multiverse offers over 70 brand new creatures, including their associated swarms, instructions on how to make your own balanced swarms, and lots of bonus material, such as 4 new demiplanes. Our Feywild Companion offers 150 pages of Feywild fun for players and DMs alike. Also, our book Fizban's Vault of Draconic Secrets contains over 50 pages of dragon-themed player options, including a subclass for each class, and much more. We've got lineages suitable for any setting, as well as optional lineage rules in our Van Richten's Librum of Lineages. With our Potions Unlocked book, we have over 100 pages of material to make potions go to the next level in your game. Please support the channel by purchasing our books using the links in the video description.